The morning air in Charleston was thick with humidity, as it always is in mid-May. 60-year-old Kenneth Harrison took his usual stroll through the historic district, the same route he'd walked for 3 years ever since Margaret, his wife of 40 years, had passed away. The houses stood like sentinels of a bygone era, their pastel facades and intricate ironwork a testament to Charleston's resilience. Kenneth breathed deeply, trying to clear his head, but the familiar comfort of his morning ritual was slowly being replaced by a growing unease. Something was wrong in his house, and his prosecutor's instincts, honed over 35 years of putting criminals behind bars, were screaming at him. As a federal prosecutor, Kenneth had dealt with every type of criminal imaginable: embezzlers who could drain a corporation's accounts with a few keystrokes, con artists who could charm the elderly out of their life savings, and cold-blooded murderers who could take a life without a second thought. He'd built his career on reading people, spotting inconsistencies, and following evidence wherever it led. Those skills didn't just switch off because he'd collected a pension. They were part of who he was, part of how he navigated the world. When Kenneth pushed open the front door of his 4,000-square-foot historic home at 8:30 that morning, the abrupt silence was the first thing that caught his attention. His son Greg and daughter-in-law Ava, who had been huddled at the dining table with papers spread between them, suddenly stopped talking. Ava, with her practiced efficiency, swept everything into a manila folder as soon as she saw him. "Morning, Kenneth," she said, flashing that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "We were just discussing some household matters." Kenneth's eyes narrowed slightly. "Household matters in my house?" Greg shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dad, we live here, too. We're just trying to help manage things." Kenneth had heard that phrase a lot lately. 3 years ago, after Margaret's funeral, they'd moved in temporarily. Greg had promised it would be just a few months until they got back on their feet. But somehow, that arrangement had become permanent. Kenneth now found himself a guest in his own home, with his son and daughter-in-law slowly taking over more and more of the household management. The day dragged on with a tension Kenneth couldn't quite name. He spent most of it in his study, pretending to read law journals, but actually listening to their whispered conversations that stopped whenever he walked by, to their phone calls taken behind closed doors. Old habits from prosecuting cases died hard. Dinner that evening was worse. Ava had cooked, as she always did now, insisting that Kenneth was too tired to handle it himself at his age. "Kenneth, you really should consider downsizing," she said, cutting her food with precise movements. "This house is nearly 4,000 square feet. The maintenance alone must be exhausting for someone your age." "I'm 68, not 90, Kenneth replied flatly. "Of course not," Ava continued smoothly. "But realistically, how much longer can you manage stairs? The upkeep, the property taxes on a historic home must be overwhelming." "What are they now?" $30,000 a year. $32,000, actually, Kenneth corrected, surprised that she knew to ask. Greg nodded along. Kenneth looked at his son, 37 years old, once so full of promise and now reduced to a yet. When had he become so weak? "The house is fine," Kenneth said, setting down his fork. "I'm fine." Ava's smile tightened. "We're just concerned. You forget things sometimes. Last week, you couldn't remember where you put your car keys." "I found them in my jacket pocket where I always put them," Kenneth countered. After looking for 20 minutes, Ava added sweetly, "Kenneth, we only want what's best for you. Greg and I have been discussing options. There are some wonderful assisted living facilities in the area. Very upscale, very comfortable. We could schedule some tours. I don't need assisted living. Not now, maybe, Ava conceded, but it's something to think about. Plan ahead. She glanced at Greg, who nodded on cue. After dinner, Kenneth retreated to his study. The house felt different now, like wearing a coat that no longer fit. He was reviewing old case files when he heard Ava's voice from the hallway. She was on her phone, speaking quietly. His prosecutor's instincts kicked in immediately. He moved closer to the door, careful to avoid the floorboard that creaked. "He's being stubborn about it," she was saying. "No, not yet. He's still mentally sharp enough to—" I know. He's been here too long. We need to do something." Kenneth's blood went cold. "Soon," she continued. He could hear her pacing. "We can't wait much longer. The opportunity won't last forever. Once he signs—" "What?" The other person's voice was too faint to hear. "No, he hasn't changed the will yet," Ava replied. "I've been watching, but we need to move before he does." She moved away, footsteps fading toward the master bedroom. Kenneth stood frozen, mind racing through possibilities. They couldn't mean what he thought they meant, could they? He looked around at his office, the same desk where he'd prepared cases that put away embezzlers, fraudsters, and murderers. The walls were lined with commendations. Photos of Margaret smiling at their 30th anniversary, Greg at his graduation. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 35 years prosecuting criminals, and now he might have two living under his own roof. That night, Kenneth barely slept. Every creak sounded sinister. Every shadow seemed to move. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, telling himself he was being paranoid. Greg was his son, his only child. He wouldn't. But that voice, Ava's voice, cold, calculating, talking about him like he was an obstacle to be removed. By dawn, Kenneth had made a decision. If they wanted to play games, they'd picked the wrong man. He hadn't spent decades in federal court to be outmaneuvered by his daughter-in-law. Whatever they were planning, he'd be ready. He'd build his case the way he always had, methodically, with evidence that couldn't be disputed. The question was, how far were they willing to go? The next morning, Kenneth couldn't shake Ava's phone call. "He's been here too long. We need to do something." He sat at his desk until the memories started, surfacing old ones he deliberately filed away under family and don't cause trouble. February, 3 months ago. Unauthorized charges on his credit card. $4,200 worth. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend spa package at Kiowa Island. When Kenneth had confronted Ava, she'd given him those wide, innocent eyes. "Kenneth, those were household expenses, family expenses. You approved them, remember? You're forgetting things more often lately. It's natural at your age." Greg had backed her up immediately. "Dad, she showed you the receipts last month. You said it was fine. Had he?" The doubt planted itself. Maybe he was forgetting. But $200 for household expenses. Still, he'd let it go. They were family. You trust family, fool. Then there was Margaret's silver. Her grandmother's sterling silver flatware set, passed down through 3 generations. Worth about $8,000, but the sentimental value was priceless. Margaret had cried when her mother gave it to her on their wedding day. One day in March, Kenneth had opened the dining room cabinet and found the velvet case empty. "Ava, Where's Margaret's silver? She'd been arranging flowers, hadn't even looked up. Oh, I took it to be professionally cleaned. It was tarnishing badly. You really should have taken better care of it, Kenneth. Without asking him, she'd finally looked at him perfectly calibrated between hurt and indignation. Kenneth, I was doing you a favor. You should be thanking me, not interrogating me like I'm one of your criminals. That stung. But she was right, wasn't he? He was being ungrateful. Except the silver never came back. When he asked a week later, Ava claimed the shop was taking longer than expected. 2 months later, she admitted they'd lost track of it. Lost an $8,000 family heirloom, his wife's most treasured possession, just gone. And he'd actually thanked Ava for trying to help. The memory made him sick. Last month, Kenneth had found torn papers in the trash. Not just torn, shredded. Years of reconstructing evidence taught him patience. He spent an hour piecing them together. Letters from his estate attorney, Colin Webster. Important letters about updating his will, discussing asset distribution. His house valued at $2.8 million. His investments totaling $850,000. His life insurance policy worth $500,000 laid out in legal language. Now shredded and thrown away. He'd confronted them at breakfast. Either of you know anything about these? Ava barely glanced at the taped papers. Oh, those. They look like junk mail. I was clearing clutter. This house is drowning in paper, Kenneth. These are from my attorney. Well, how was I supposed to know? You really should go digital. It's 2025. Greg had actually laughed. Laughed now. In the morning light of May 16th, Kenneth saw the pattern. Not isolated incidents, but a campaign. The credit card charges testing his awareness, his willingness to fight back. When he didn't push hard, they learned he could be manipulated. The missing silver removing assets, seeing if he'd investigate. When he accepted the lost at the shop story, they learned he could be lied to. The destroyed documents intercepting communication with his attorney, keeping him isolated, making sure he didn't update his will. Each incident building on the last. Testing, probing, preparing. But for what? Kenneth pulled up property records. Houses comparable to his, $2.70 to $3.1 million. His place was worth $2.8 million easily. His investments, $850,000. His federal pension, $6,200 monthly. Life insurance, $500,000 with Greg as beneficiary. Total assets nearly $4.2 million. More than enough reason for someone desperate to do something terrible. The answer hit him like a physical blow. Everything, they wanted everything. Not later, when he died naturally. Now, immediately. His hands shook with rage. His own son, the boy he'd coached in Little League, helped through college. Stood beside at his wedding, Greg had brought this viper into his home. And they were circling like he was already dead. But Kenneth wasn't just some confused old man. He was Kenneth Harrison, federal prosecutor. He'd taken down organized crime figures, corrupt politicians, con artists who'd fooled hundreds. If they wanted war, they'd declared it on the wrong man. He opened a fresh document and started documenting every incident, every red flag, dates, amounts, witnesses, evidence. Because that's what prosecutors do, build cases, brick by brick. February 12th, unauthorized charges, $4,200. Explanation implausible. March 8th, Margaret's silver disappears. Value $8,000. Story inconsistent. April 15th. Legal documents destroyed. Letters from attorney regarding will. May 15th. Overheard conversation. He's been here too long. We need to do something. They thought he was vulnerable. An old man grieving, maybe slipping mentally, easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to remove. They were about to learn, never underestimate your opponent, especially when he spent 35 years learning to think like a criminal while prosecuting them, and never try to con a federal prosecutor in his own home. Kenneth saved the document, encrypted it, backed it up to cloud storage. Then he sat back and allowed himself a cold smile, the kind he used to give defense attorneys when he had them cornered. Game on. By May 18th. Kenneth couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. 3 days of turning it over in his mind, and the conclusion was unavoidable. He needed hard evidence, not suspicions, not instincts, but facts, numbers, the kind of proof that holds up in court. He drove to his bank on King Street that morning. The historic facades of Charleston passed by in a blur. 35 years in federal prosecution had taught him one thing: follow the money. Always follow the money. The bank manager, a pleasant woman named Sandra, directed him to a Tekis Green, a senior account specialist. He was maybe 50, graying at the temples with the careful manner of someone who'd seen too many financial disasters. "Mr. Harrison, good to see you. What can I help with today?" "I need a complete account review," Kenneth said. "All transactions for the past 6 months. Every withdrawal, every transfer, everything." Something flickered in Atekis's eyes. "Of course. Give me a moment." Kenneth sat in the small glass office while Atekis typed. Through the window, he could see people going about their normal lives, getting cash, depositing checks, living in a world where their own children weren't robbing them blind. Here we are. Atekis slid the printouts across the desk, pages and pages of transactions. Then he paused, studying the documents. His finger traced down a column of numbers. "Mr. Harrison," he hesitated, that careful tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "I see quite a few large cash withdrawals here. Are you certain all of these were authorized by you?" Kenneth scanned the pages. His hands went cold despite the warm office. February 3rd, $8,500. February 28th, $12,000. March 15th, $9,200. March 29th, $14,300. April 10th, $11,600. April 24th, $11,400. The numbers swam before his eyes. He did the math automatically, a skill honed from years of calculating damages and stolen assets in court cases. "That's $67,000. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Yes, sir." Atekis pulled out another sheet. "And I see your signature on the authorization forms, but..." He stopped. "But what?" "Forgive me. This is delicate. Sometimes family members have access to accounts for elderly relatives for legitimate purposes. Of course, but occasionally." He let the sentence hang. Kenneth looked at the signatures. They were his. Except they weren't. Close, very close. But the capital H in Harrison was slightly different. The flourish at the end of the N was too pronounced. He'd signed his name tens of thousands of times on legal documents. He knew every stroke. These are forgeries. Atekis looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. I can't make that determination officially, but if you're stating that you didn't authorize these withdrawals, I'm stating exactly that. How is this possible? Don't you have security protocols? We do, Atticus said carefully. But if someone has your account information, knows your patterns, and has access to your home address and personal documents, he spread his hands. It's not impossible, especially if it's someone you trust. Trust, that word again. The word that had cost him $67,000. I want all accounts frozen immediately, Kenneth said. New passwords, new security questions, everything. And I want to know who made these withdrawals, cameras, timestamps, whatever you have. Of course. I'll start the process right away. Atticus typed rapidly. Mr. Harrison, I have to ask. Do you want to file a police report? This is theft. Not yet, Kenneth said. Not until I know the full extent. Not until I have every piece of evidence locked down tight. Let me think about it right now. Just secure the accounts. Done, Atticus confirmed. As of this moment, no one can access your funds without you physically present with photo ID. Is there anything else? Yes. Don't mention this to anyone who calls or comes in asking about me. No information to anyone, family or otherwise. Understood. Atticus nodded gravely. Understood. Kenneth drove home in a daze. $67,000 gone. Stolen by his own son and his wife systematically over 6 months. That was on top of the $4,200 in credit card charges, the $8,000 in stolen silver. They'd taken nearly $80,000 from him, and he'd been too trusting, too grief-stricken, too stupid to notice. No, not stupid. They'd calculated this, picked their moment. Moved in after Margaret died when he was vulnerable, isolated him, made him doubt himself, gaslit him into thinking he was forgetful. Losing his edge, he parked in his driveway and sat there for 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel. Through the window, he could see Ava in the kitchen, probably planning what to cook for dinner, playing the beautiful daughter-in-law while she bled him dry. Inside, Kenneth went straight to his study. Neither of them looked up from the living room where they were watching television, like they hadn't just stolen enough money to buy a luxury car. He locked his study door and opened his encrypted document, added the new information with dates, amounts, and account numbers. The evidence file was growing, each entry another nail in their coffin, but evidence wasn't enough. He needed to know what they were planning next, because $67,000 wasn't going to satisfy them, not with a house worth $2.8 million and investments totaling $850,000 still in play. This was just the appetizer. They thought he was confused, forgetful, easy to manipulate. They were about to learn the most important rule he'd taught young prosecutors for 3 decades. Never underestimate your opponent, and always assume they know more than they're showing. Time to stop being the victim. Time to become the prosecutor again. That night, May 18th, Kenneth couldn't sleep. Not from stress this time, but from planning. Old habits rising like muscle memory. How do you build an unbeatable case? You gather evidence so overwhelming that even the best defense attorney can't spin it. But first, he needed to know what they were saying when they thought he couldn't hear. The next morning, Kenneth drove to an electronics store across town where nobody knew him. Bought a recording app for his phone. In South Carolina, it's legal to record conversations when you're protecting your own property from theft. He'd prosecuted enough cases involving wiretaps to know the law inside out. That evening, Kenneth played his part. Tired, old Kenneth. Shuffling off to bed at 9 o'clock. He even made a show of taking his reading glasses off, rubbing his eyes. Long day, he muttered, to no one in particular. Sleep well, Kenneth, Ava said sweetly from the couch. Kenneth climbed the stairs slowly, went to his room, closed the door, then opened it just a crack. He activated the recording app and positioned his phone on the hallway table where it could pick up voices from downstairs. He sat in the darkness of his room, door cracked, listening for 20 minutes. Nothing, just the sound of the television. Then Ava's voice, sharp and impatient. He went to the bank today. Kenneth's blood pressure spiked. How did she know so? Greg's voice, uncertain as always. He was gone for over an hour. That's not normal. He usually just uses the ATM. Maybe he had questions about something. Or maybe he's checking the accounts. A pause. We need to speed this up. Ava, I don't know. You don't know. Her voice rose, then dropped to an angry whisper. Your father is sitting on millions. We're drowning in debt. And you don't know if that old fool doesn't add you to his will as the sole beneficiary soon. We'll have to do something else. Like what? Greg sounded scared. I don't know yet. But if he's getting suspicious, we can't wait around. Maybe we need to push things along. I can't just... You know, I can't. Then I'll find someone who can. I have contacts, Greg. People who solve problems for the right price. Contacts. People who solve problems. Kenneth felt ice water in his veins. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was something darker. Jesus, Ava, you're talking about. I'm talking about survival. Do you want to lose everything? Do you want your creditors showing up here? Because they will, Greg. They will find us and they will take everything. And your father will finally know what a failure you really are. Silence. Then Greg, barely audible. He already knows. Kenneth heard footsteps. Someone going upstairs. He slipped back from the door, eased it closed, and stood in the darkness of his room. Phone still recording in the hallway. They thought he was asleep, harmless. A problem to be solved. The next morning, May 20th, Kenneth made a phone call he should have made days ago to Charlie Bowman, a man he'd worked with 15 years ago, when he was a young detective with the Charleston PD. Now he ran his own private investigation firm. Charlie Bowman here. Charlie. It's Kenneth Harrison. Kenneth Harrison. I'll be damned. How are you, counselor? Been better, Charlie. I need your help. Privately. Name it. They met at a coffee shop in Mount Pleasant, away from Charleston's historic center. Charlie looked older, don't we all? But his eyes were still sharp. You don't lose that cop instinct. Kenneth laid it out for him. Everything. The stolen money, the forged signatures, the credit card fraud, the missing silver, the overheard conversations. He didn't mention the recording, yet wanted to see what Charlie found independently. Charlie listened without interrupting, taking notes on a small pad. When Kenneth finished, he sat back and whistled softly. Your own son. My own son, Kenneth confirmed. What do you want me to do? Background check on both of them. Deep dive. Finances, employment, history, criminal records, associates, everything. I need to know who I'm dealing with. You're dealing with your son, Kenneth. No, Kenneth met his eyes. I'm dealing with two people who are stealing from me and plotting something worse. They might be family, but right now they're suspects. Treat them accordingly. Charlie nodded slowly. Okay, I'll need a few days. Maybe a week for the complete picture. Take what you need. Be thorough. And Charlie, Kenneth hesitated. I know, discretion. More than discretion, Kenneth said. Invisibility. They can't know I'm investigating. Understood. Charlie slid his coffee cup aside. Kenneth, I have to ask. Are you prepared for what I might find? I'm prepared for the truth, whatever it is. They shook hands. Kenneth drove back to Charleston, feeling something he hadn't felt in days. Control. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for battle. That's what Greg and Ava didn't understand. They'd declared war on a federal prosecutor. Someone who'd spent 35 years learning how to dismantle criminal enterprises piece by piece. Someone who knew how to be patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. They thought they were playing chess with a confused old man. They were actually in a courtroom with a prosecutor who'd never lost a major case. At home that evening, Kenneth smiled at them over dinner, complimented Ava's cooking, asked Greg about his day with genuine-sounding interest. He played the role perfectly. Underneath, he was counting evidence, recording conversations, building time, documenting everything in federal court. They had a saying, the defendant doesn't know they've lost until the verdict is read, but the prosecutor knows from the moment the evidence is strong enough. Kenneth already knew. They just hadn't figured it out yet. The war had started, and they'd already lost. The week of May 21st to 26th was the longest of Kenneth's life. Waiting, watching, playing oblivious Kenneth while Charlie sent updates. Charlie's report arrived May 23rd via encrypted email. Kenneth read it in his locked study, hands trembling with rage. Greg had lost his job at First Horizon Bank in May 2024, over a year ago. Not laid off, fired for financial irregularities. He'd been skimming from elderly client accounts. $500 here, $300 there. They caught him at $12,000. Gave him a choice. Resign quietly or face criminal charges. Since then, nothing. No job whatsoever. Every morning for the past year, Greg put on a suit, grabbed his briefcase, and pretended to go to work. Where did he go? Coffee shops, the library, anywhere but an actual office, living entirely off Kenneth. Every meal, every bill paid by the man he was planning to murder. Current debts. According to Charlie's investigation, $43,000. Credit cards maxed at $28,000. Payday loans at $15,000 with predatory interest rates. Ava's name was on most of it. They'd been juggling payments, robbing Peter to pay Paul, sinking deeper every month. They were desperate, drowning financially. And Kenneth wasn't their life raft, his death was. Charlie's report also included phone records, multiple calls to burner phones that couldn't be traced. Late-night calls from Ava's cell, short duration. Under 2 minutes, the kind of calls you make when you're arranging something illegal. Location data showed Ava had visited a sketchy part of North Charleston 3 times in 2 weeks. The kind of neighborhood where you don't go unless you're buying drugs or hiring someone for something you shouldn't be hiring them for. May 24th evening. Kenneth sat in his study, examining these documents when he heard footsteps. He quickly closed the folder, hid it under old legal pads. Kenneth. Ava's voice, soft, tender, the voice she'd probably practiced in mirrors. Come in. She entered with a gift box wrapped in burgundy paper with a gold bow. Hair and makeup perfect, cream blouse, tailored pants. This was clearly a rehearsed performance. I need to talk to you. She sat in the leather chair across from his desk, setting the box between them like a peace offering. I know things have been difficult lately between Uster, tension, the arguments, and I want to take full responsibility for my part. Kenneth said nothing, just watched her performance with the detached interest of a prosecutor watching a defendant take the stand and dig their own grave. The truth is, I've been under enormous stress. We both have, Greg and I, financial pressures, personal issues, and I've been, she paused, eyes glistening with what looked like real tears. Impressive. I've been ungrateful. Terrible, really. She slid the box toward him with both hands. What's this? Open it, please. Kenneth pulled the ribbon, lifted the lid. Inside, airline tickets in a leather wallet. Hotel confirmations on thick paper. Detailed itineraries. Rome. The Hotel de Russi. 5-star near the Spanish Steps. Departure May 27th to 3rd days away. Return May 30th. Rome. Kenneth looked up, letting confusion show. This is... I don't know what to say. Kenneth let his voice crack slightly. Elderly Kenneth moved to tears. Thank you, both of you, truly. Ava stood, came around the desk, hugged him. Kenneth felt her cold hands on his shoulders, smelled her Chanel, probably bought with his stolen money. Pack light, she whispered near his ear. You're going to have the time of your life. The time of my life, Kenneth thought. The last time of my life, she meant, after they left. Chatting about Rome and travel plans, Kenneth sat examining the tickets. They were absolutely real. Legitimate Delta booking. Flight 1247 Charleston to Rome via JFK. Hotel reservation with his name. They'd spent actual money, probably $5,000. A small investment for a $3.6 million inheritance. He called Charlie immediately. Voice low. They just gave me a trip to Rome, leaving day after tomorrow. 3 days, Charlie said. Long silence. Kenneth, they need you gone 3 days minimum. Long enough to kill you and stage it however they want. Then, when you're supposed to return from your lovely vacation, they report you missing. Oh, he must have had an accident in Rome. Got lost, had a stroke. They'll play the worried family. Meanwhile, your body is wrapped in a carpet in the Congaree swamp. Do not get on that plane. Asterisk, I won't, Kenneth said. But they can't know. I know, Charlie agreed. They have to believe their plan is working perfectly. What exactly are you thinking? I need to see what they do when they think I'm safely out of the country. I need them to make their move with me watching and recording incontrovertible video evidence. Kenneth, that's dangerous. If they realize you're still here. I spent 35 years prosecuting dangerous people, Charlie, Kenneth said. I know what I'm doing. Did he, though? Standing there with Rome tickets in hand and the reality that his own son was methodically planning his murder. He wasn't sure he knew anything anymore except this one thing. They'd made their move, shown their hand. Now it was his turn, and prosecutors always saved their best evidence for last. May 26th, day before his scheduled flight. Kenneth woke at dawn, mind already racing through contingencies, backup plans, potential problems. The house was quiet. Greg and Ava presumably still asleep or lying awake, reviewing their murder plans. Kenneth packed loudly with deliberate slowness. Opened drawers where anyone passing might see, folded clothes with exaggerated care, added his blood pressure medications to the bathroom counter, leaving the orange bottles clearly visible. Every detail had to sell the performance. Kenneth Harrison, excited elderly man, preparing for his dream vacation. Greg and Ava left around 9 o'clock. Last-minute errands before your trip, Ava announced brightly over breakfast. Getting things to make the house nice for when you get back. Getting things like probably paying the final installment to their hired killers. Take your time, Kenneth said pleasantly. I'll be fine finishing my packing. They exchanged one of their looks, Greg nervous, Ava cold and confident. Then they were gone. Kenneth was alone with Consuelo, their housekeeper. He could feel her tension from 2 rooms away. Kenneth was in his bedroom, triple-checking his phone's camera settings when he heard soft, hesitant footsteps. Too late to be Greg or Ava, Mr. Harrison. Consuelo Martinez stood in his doorway, 52, from Honduras. She'd worked for them 8 years through Margaret's long illness. The funeral, those horrible hollow months when Kenneth couldn't function. She'd quietly cleaned around him while he sat motionless in his study for hours, never making him feel like a burden. Right now, she looked absolutely terrified, face pale, drained of color, hands visibly shaking as they gripped her dustcloth. Consuelo, what's wrong? Please, Mr. Harrison. She glanced nervously over her shoulder, then came in and closed the door. Please don't go on this trip tomorrow. Don't get on that airplane. Kenneth stopped. Why? What happened? Just trust me. Please, something is very wrong. Sit down, take a breath, and tell me exactly what happened. She sat on the edge of the chair, tears already starting. Yesterday afternoon, I was cleaning the guest bathroom upstairs. Mrs. Ava was on her phone in the bedroom. The door was almost closed, but not completely. She didn't know I was there. What did she say? Consuelo's voice dropped to barely a whisper. She said, he flies out tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. sharp. The house will be completely empty for 3 full days, maybe 4. Come on, the 27th after dark, evening time, between 8 and 9. Do everything very quickly. The carpet for transportation. I will leave it already rolled up in the garage, where it's easy to find. Kenneth's blood turned to ice. Carpet for transportation, CONSUELO. Single quotes, eyes were huge. Mr. Harrison, what does that mean? Why would someone need a carpet to transport something? Because you wrap a dead body in it, Kenneth thought, so neighbors don't see what you're carrying out. What else did you hear? She said, make absolutely sure there's no mess at all. No blood anywhere. No evidence left behind. Then she was quiet, listening. Then she said, yes, $25,000 total. $12,500 now, like we agreed. And the other $12,500 when everything is completely finished. Then she ended the call very quickly. $25,000, the going rate for murder for hire. Is there more? Consuelo. Yes, 2 days ago, Monday, I went to the grocery store. On my way back, I stopped at the Citadel Mall to use the restroom. In the parking lot, I saw Mrs. Ava standing next to a black van with 2 men. What did they look like? Big men, very muscular. One had tattoos going up his neck. The other wore all black. They look dangerous, Mr. Harrison. Not good people. While I watched from my car, Mrs. Ava gave them a brown envelope. One opened it and started counting. I saw money, cash, many, many bills. She grabbed Kenneth's arm, grip surprisingly strong. I don't know exactly what they're planning, but I know it's something very, very bad. Evil. Please, you have to believe me. Don't go on this trip. Kenneth looked at this woman who'd quietly observed his household for 8 years, who'd seen things she didn't understand, but knew in her bones were wrong, who was risking everything to warn him. I believe you, Consuelo, he said. Every single word, and what you just told me may have saved my life. Her eyes went wider. What are you going to do? I'm going to handle this properly, but I need you to do exactly as I say. Act completely normal around both of them. Don't let them suspect for 1 second that you told me anything. Can you do that? She nodded, wiping tears. One more thing. After I leave tomorrow, take the entire week off. Go visit your sister in Colombia like you've been planning. Don't come back until I personally call you. It won't be safe here. Yes, Mr. Harrison. I understand. And Consuelo, Kenneth added. Thank you for your courage. After she left, Kenneth sat on his bed with his phone, mind clicking through final pieces. Carpet for transportation. 2 dangerous men. $25,000 in cash. No mess, no blood. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was an active murder-for-hire plot in its final stages. He called Robert Miller, his neighbor. 75, retired dentist, lived next door for 15 years. Robert, I need an urgent favor. Somewhat unusual. Can I come over right now, through the back, where no one will see? 20 minutes later, Kenneth was in Robert's den, explaining everything. The theft, the debts, Charlie's investigation, Consuelo's warning. Robert listened without interrupting, his face growing graver. Kenneth, I can hardly believe it. Your own son. I need to catch them in the act, Kenneth said. Video evidence of them bringing hired criminals into my house, but I can't be there. They have to believe I'm on a plane to Rome. You want to watch from here? Robert asked. Your living room window has a perfect view of my front entrance. I can see and record everything. It's the only way to get proof that holds up in court. Of course, you can stay, Robert said. Our guest room is yours. He paused. But shouldn't you call the police now? Tell them what you know, and tell them what... Kenneth countered. That I'm suspicious of a gift. That my housekeeper overheard something. Police need probable cause for warrants. But if I capture video of known criminals entering my house while they think I'm out of the country, that's not suspicion. That's evidence. Conspiracy to commit murder. Attempted murder. Robert nodded slowly, understanding. What do you need? Just a dark room to watch from. Absolute discretion. Not even Eleanor can know I'm here. We'll agree Eleanor will be told I was at an airport hotel. At 4 p.m., Kenneth made a deliberate show of calling a taxi from his front porch where anyone watching would see. Fumbled, obviously, with his suitcase. Waved to Tom Wheeler trimming hedges across the street. Asterisk off to Rome, the eternal city. Kenneth called out cheerfully. See you in a few days. Don't let the neighborhood fall apart without me. The taxi pulled up. Kenneth loaded his suitcase with visible effort, climbed slowly in. As they drove away, he looked back one final time. Ava stood in the upstairs window, phone pressed to her ear, watching him leave with intense focus, making a call right at that moment, probably telling someone he just left. The target is gone. Tomorrow night, after dark, the house is completely yours. The taxi took Kenneth on a normal route toward the airport, then doubled back and dropped him at Robert's back entrance. He slipped inside like a ghost. By 7 p.m., as the sun set over Charleston, Kenneth was positioned in Robert's dark living room. Chair pulled to the window, his house perfectly visible across their yards. Maybe 50 feet away, phone fully charged. Camera tested, recording app ready. Backup battery in his pocket. All he had to do was wait. Wait for them to spring their trap. Wait to see how close he'd come to ending up wrapped in carpet, dumped in the Congaree swamp. Another missing person case never solved. The sun set. Lights came on in his house. Through the windows, Kenneth could see Greg and Ava moving around, preparing for his murder. May 27th, 7:30 p.m. Kenneth sat in Robert Miller's darkened living room, chair positioned directly at the window. His house, 50 feet away across their adjoining yards, looked peaceful, light glowing warmly. Greg and Ava moving around inside, probably congratulating themselves on their perfect plan. He checked his phone for the 10th time, battery at 100%. Camera function tested and ready. Recording app activated. Backup portable battery in his pocket. Everything prepared, Robert had retreated to his bedroom to give Kenneth privacy. Eleanor thought he was staying at an airport hotel for his early morning flight. Just Kenneth, the darkness, and his phone camera pointed steadily at his own front door. His heart hammered against his ribs. Prosecutor's instinct told him they'd come. Consuelo's warning had been too specific, too detailed. But actually sitting here, waiting to watch his own murder play out with the substitute victim, a carpet, apparently felt surreal. 8:15 p.m., still nothing. Greg and Ava were visible in the kitchen through the window, talking, gesturing, probably reviewing the timing. When would the killers arrive? When would they leave? How long does it take to dump a body? Kenneth took a slow breath, steadied himself. 35 years prosecuting criminals had taught him patience. Evidence comes to those who wait. 8:30, then 8:45, then 9. At exactly 9:02 p.m., a black van rolled down their quiet street. No headlights. It slowed deliberately, then stopped directly in front of Kenneth's house. No license plate visible on the front bumper. Here we go, asterisk. Kenneth raised his phone, started recording video. His hands were surprisingly steady. Decades of courtroom work kicking in. Two men climbed out of the van, both large, muscular builds. One wore a black hoodie, the other a dark jacket. They moved with purpose, not hesitation. Professionals. They'd done this kind of thing before. Ava opened the front door before they could knock. Smart, move less noise, fewer chances for neighbors to notice anything unusual. She stepped aside, gestured them in quickly. The door closed behind them. Kenneth zoomed the camera in as far as possible while keeping the image stable. Got clear shots of both men's faces in the porch light before the door shut. Good, identifiable dot. Now came the wait. What were they doing inside his house right now? Following Ava's instructions? Probably finding the carpet she'd left rolled up in the garage, practicing how to carry it. Making sure two men could handle the weight convincingly if any neighbors happened to see them. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Las 9:10. Las 9:15, 9:25. Kenneth's phone kept recording, batteries slowly ticking down. At 9:43 p.m., his front door opened again. The two men emerged, carrying a large rolled carpet between them. Navy blue color, maybe 8 feet long, thick enough to conceal the body. Heavy enough that both men strained visibly under the weight, muscles tensing. Ice water flooded through Kenneth's veins. That carpet that was supposed to be him wrapped up, anonymous, disposable, driven to some godforsaken corner of the Congaree swamp and dumped. Like yesterday's trash, his son and his wife standing there watching, making absolutely sure the job got done correctly. The men loaded the carpet efficiently into the back of the van. Their movements were practiced, professional. They'd definitely done this before, probably multiple times. Greg appeared on the porch beside Ava, his son, actually watching hired killers dispose of what he believed was his father's body. His face looked pale in the porch light, but he was there, present, complicit, participating in his murder. The taller man, the one in the hoodie, turned back toward the house, said something to Ava Kenneth couldn't hear. She nodded, reached into her pocket, handed him something small. An envelope, probably. Final payment for services rendered. The men climbed back into the van. This time, when they pulled away from the curb, Kenneth saw it clearly, the license plate. They had attached it after loading their cargo. Professional criminals know that police look for vehicles without plates driving around at night. Kenneth captured absolutely everything on video: the plate number, the van's make and model, the men's faces. Greg and Ava standing on his front porch, watching the van disappear down the tree-lined street. As soon as the van turned the corner, out of sight, Ava grabbed Greg's arm roughly, pulled him back inside the house. The door shut hard. Lights went off downstairs. Within just a few minutes, Kenneth saw the bedroom light upstairs come on, going to bed, sleeping soundly. Job well done. Problem permanently solved. Kenneth sat in the darkness, phone still recording everything, hands shaking now. Not from fear, from pure cold rage. From the crystalline clarity of knowing he'd been absolutely right. They'd actually done it. Hired professional killers. Planned his murder down to the smallest detail. Executed their plan while he was supposed to be sipping wine in Rome. Completely unaware that he'd never make it home alive. He stopped the recording, checked the footage carefully clear, stable, unmistakable. Backed it up to cloud storage immediately, then made 2 more backup copies. Then he called Charlie Bowman. "Charlie, you still up?" "Kenneth, you all right?" "I just watched 2 men carry a carpet out of my house," Kenneth said, his voice surprisingly steady. "The carpet that was supposed to have my body wrapped inside it." Long silence on the line, then very carefully, "You got it on video. Every single second. Clear faces, license plate, everything. I need you to identify these men tonight, if possible. Send me the clearest screenshots you have. I'll run them through my databases immediately." Kenneth did. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed with Charlie's response. "Kenneth, these guys are very bad news. Randy Sumner and Dean Walker. Both have extensive priors: assault, extortion, aggravated battery. Sumner did 8 years in Lieber Correctional. They're known associates of a major loan shark operation in North Charleston. Can you trace the phone records? Calls between Ava and either of them. Already working on it. Give me an hour." Kenneth ended the call and sat back in the darkness, still watching his house across the yard. His son and daughter-in-law sleeping peacefully upstairs after arranging his murder. 35 years in federal prosecution had shown him humanity's full capacity for evil. But you never truly expect to find it in your own family. You never think your own child could look directly at you and see nothing but a dollar figure, an obstacle, a problem to be permanently eliminated. Well, they'd made their move, shown their complete hand. Now it was his turn. And prosecutors don't just build cases, They systematically demolished defenses. Tomorrow he'd return from Rome, play the confused, grateful old man one final time. Let them panic. Let them wonder desperately what went wrong. Because they would make mistakes. Desperate people always do. That's exactly how we catch them. May 28th through 30th. 3 days that felt like 3 years. Kenneth stayed at Robert's house during his supposed trip to Rome. Charlie worked his contacts relentlessly. Kenneth coordinated everything from Robert's guest bedroom. By the end of day 1, they had concrete phone records, separate calls between Ava's personal cell and Randy, Sumner's burner phone over the past 3 weeks. Mall surveillance footage showed Ava handing Randy a thick envelope on May 24th, presumably the down payment. The pieces were falling into place with satisfying precision. May 29th. Kenneth called Colin Webster, his estate attorney. Though he specialized in property law now, he'd started his career in criminal defense. He understood both sides of the courtroom. "Colin, I need to see you urgently and privately." His downtown office at 2 p.m., Kenneth brought absolutely everything. The video footage from May 27th showing the carpet being carried out. The phone records Charlie had pulled through his law enforcement contacts. The bank statements documenting the $67,000 theft. The audio recording of Ava threatening to find someone who can handle me if Greg wouldn't. Charlie's complete investigative report. Consuelo's notarized sworn statement about everything she'd overheard. Colin watched the video twice in complete silence. Studied the phone records carefully. Read through Consuelo's detailed statement. His professional expression gradually shifted from concerned to grave to something approaching genuine shock. "Kenneth, this isn't just attempted murder," Colin said finally. "This is conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, signature forgery, elder financial abuse. And because Greg used interstate banking systems to move the stolen money," he looked up at Kenneth directly. "This crosses state lines. This is federal jurisdiction." "I know you want to prosecute fully," Kenneth said. "I want complete justice. Full legal justice. I want them formally charged, properly tried, and legally convicted. And I want the evidence so airtight that no defense attorney in the entire country could create even a shadow of reasonable doubt." Colin nodded slowly, understanding the full weight of what Kenneth was asking. "Then we need to involve law enforcement immediately. Charleston Police Department and FBI. The financial crimes automatically make it federal jurisdiction." "Kenneth, are you fully prepared for what comes next?" Colin asked gently. "This will utterly destroy your relationship with your son forever. He destroyed it the moment he decided to have me killed." "Fair enough." Colin started making detailed notes on his legal pad. "We'll need to move very carefully. If they suspect, even for a moment, that you know what they've done, they might run. Or worse, they might try again using different methods. Can you maintain the pretense a bit longer?" "How much longer?" 2 weeks minimum, maybe 3. Long enough for the FBI to build their complete case, obtain all necessary warrants, coordinate properly with Charleston PD. We do this absolutely right, Kenneth. One shot, no mistakes, no appeals based on procedural errors. Kenneth agreed. 3 more weeks of living in the same house as his would-be murderers. 3 weeks of playing the oblivious, grateful victim while the legal trap slowly, inexorably closed around them. But first, he had to come home from Rome. May 30th, 3 p.m., Kenneth texted. "Greg from his phone, landing soon. Can't wait to tell you about the Colosseum. Absolutely incredible." What an amazing gift. Thank you both so much. He waited exactly 1 hour, then called a taxi to Robert's back entrance. Had the driver take him on a circuitous route past the airport road, then finally to his own street. He even had his Rome luggage with him. He'd actually packed it properly, after all. Every detail mattered. The taxi pulled up directly in front of his house at precisely 4:47 p.m. Kenneth paid the driver with cash, tipped generously, grabbed his obviously well-traveled suitcase, and walked up the front path. Used his house keys to unlock the door. Hello. I'm home. Back from Rome. Dead silence. Then sudden footsteps thundering down the stairs. Ava appeared in the hallway first. Face absolutely white, eyes huge and disbelieving. She looked exactly like someone who'd just seen a corpse climb out of its grave and walk through the front door, which, from her guilty perspective, she essentially had. Kenneth, her voice actually cracked. You're back already. Of course, I'm back, Kenneth said cheerfully. Flight landed about an hour early. Actually, Rome was absolutely incredible, Ava. Just incredible. He smiled warmly, playing his assigned role perfectly. Where's Greg? I want to tell you both all about it. Ava practically shouted up the stairs. Greg, your father's home. Greg appeared at the top of the staircase behind Hurrig's, same expression, pale, shocked, fundamentally confused. Like his brain simply couldn't process what his eyes were clearly seeing. Dad, how was the trip? Kenneth asked, already pulling his suitcase toward the stairs. Wonderful. The Hotel de Russie was absolutely spectacular. 5 stars barely describes it. And the Colosseum? Kenneth shook his head, still smiling broadly. I'm so grateful to both of you, truly. But I have to admit, I'm completely exhausted. That's a very long flight for a man my age. He chuckled self-deprecatingly. I'm going to go unpack and rest for a bit. We can talk much more at dinner. Maybe I'll show you some photos. Sure, yes. Dinner? Ava's voice sounded completely mechanical, like a broken recording. Kenneth walked directly past them both. Pulling his wheeled suitcase, climbed the stairs with deliberate slowness, went to his bedroom, closed and locked the door quietly. Only then, alone in his room, did he allow himself a cold, satisfied smile. Downstairs, he could hear frantic whispering, starting immediately. Ava's voice, sharp and panicked. Greg's confused and genuinely scared. They were desperately trying to understand what had gone catastrophically wrong. Where was his body? Had Randy and Dean actually completed the job as paid? How was he standing in their house, alive, and chatting about tourist attractions? Kenneth unpacked slowly and methodically hung up clothes he'd never actually worn in Rome. Carefully arranged toiletries he'd never used. All the elaborate props of an expensive trip that had never actually happened. Dinner that evening was absolutely surreal. Greg barely touched his food. Ava kept watching Kenneth intently, like he might suddenly vanish into thin air. Every single time Kenneth casually mentioned Rome, the beautiful fountains, the amazing pasta, the stunning ancient ruins, he could literally see her mind desperately working, trying frantically to reconcile the completely impossible. Did you have any problems during the trip? Greg finally asked. Any trouble at all? Trouble, Kenneth replied. No. Everything was absolutely perfect. Why do you ask? Just traveling internationally alone at your age, Greg said. We were a bit worried. I'm 68, not 90, Kenneth said mildly, with just a touch of gentle humor. Besides, I felt perfectly safe the entire time. Rome's very civilized. Ava's fork clattered loudly against her plate. After dinner, they disappeared immediately to their bedroom. Kenneth could hear Ava's voice through the walls, angry and accusatory now. Phone calls being made. She was probably trying desperately to reach Randy and Dean. Demanding answers, demanding explanations. She wouldn't get any useful answers. Charlie had already discreetly tipped off his primary contact in the Charleston PD. Randy and Dean were now being actively watched, their phones carefully monitored. Every single call Ava made to them was being digitally recorded for evidence. Kenneth sat in his locked study and meticulously updated his evidence. File added detailed notes about their specific reactions, their revealing questions, their obvious, barely concealed panic. Prosecutors have a term for it. Consciousness of guilt. The specific behavior patterns that clearly reveal a defendant knows they've committed a serious crime, and Greg and Ava were displaying textbook examples beautifully over the next 2 weeks. Kenneth carefully watched them unravel. Ava grew visibly thinner, more brittle, more paranoid. Greg jumped noticeably at every unexpected sound. They whispered constantly in corners, made furtive phone calls with doors closed, checked the windows obsessively, watching for something. They knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. They just didn't know what or how or when the inevitable other shoe would finally drop. The perfect beauty of it. Kenneth didn't have to do anything at all. Just exist. Just live his completely normal life in his own house. Every single day he remained alive was irrefutable evidence of their failure. Every meal they shared together was a constant reminder that their supposedly perfect plan had somehow, impossibly, fallen apart. And all the while, the FBI was systematically building its airtight case, meticulously documenting the phone calls, professionally analyzing Kenneth's video evidence, interviewing Randy Sumner extensively, who's suddenly facing 30 years, minimum for murder for hire, was very interested in negotiating a reduced sentence through cooperation. June 15th. Detective Michael Torres called Colin directly. The arrest warrants were ready, all properly signed. Tomorrow morning they'd move. Kenneth lay in bed that night, staring at the dark ceiling. Tomorrow it would all come out into the open. Tomorrow his son would be arrested by federal agents. Tomorrow the truth would stop being his private secret and become official public record. Part of him, a small part, buried very deep, grieved for the son he'd thought he had, the boy who'd played catch in the backyard, who'd graduated college with honors, who'd gotten married while Kenneth stood proudly beside him. That son had never really existed. Or if he had, he'd been completely replaced by a stranger who'd looked directly at his own father and seen only money, only opportunity, only a life to be ended. Kenneth didn't sleep, but he was ready. Tomorrow, justice would finally begin. The next 2 weeks were theater, pure, calculated theater. Kenneth played his role perfectly. The oblivious old man, grateful for his family, happy to be alive after his wonderful Roman vacation. He showed Greg and Ava his photos from Rome, carefully selected stock images he'd downloaded. Talked about the Colosseum, the Trevi Fountain, the incredible pasta. Watched their faces as they tried to smile. Tried to understand how their perfect plan had failed. Meanwhile, Colin and Charlie were working with law enforcement, building the case, making it airtight. June 15th. Detective Michael Torres, a Charleston PD investigator Colin knew well, obtained the warrants. Search warrant for Greg and Ava's belongings. Arrest warrants for all for conspirators. Torres was methodical, 42 years old, 20 years on the force. He'd handled major cases before. He called Colin that evening. We've also got Randy Sumner talking. He's looking at 30 years for murder, for hire. He's suddenly very interested in cooperation. What's he saying? Asterisk everything, Torres said. Ava Harrison hired him and Dean Walker for $25,000, $12,500 up front, $12,500 on completion. The plan was simple. Break in while Kenneth was supposedly in Rome, strangle him, wrap the body in the carpet she'd left in the garage, dump it in the Congaree Swamp, remote area. Body might not surface for weeks, if ever. Everyone would assume Kenneth vanished in Rome. Old man, foreign country, got lost, had a stroke, fell in the Tiber. By the time anyone questioned it, the trail would be ice cold, professional, thorough, and it would have worked perfectly if Consuelo hadn't overheard that phone call. June 20th, dawn. Kenneth woke to his alarm at 5:30 a.m., made coffee, sat in his study, reviewing the timeline one final time by 7 a.m. He was ready at 7:43 a.m. Precisely, he heard vehicles pulling up outside. Kenneth walked to the window. For unmarked police cars, to FBI vehicles. Detective Torres stepped out first, followed by Agent Maria Garcia from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They brought back up 8 officers total. This was it. Kenneth opened his front door before they could knock. Detective Torres, Agent Garcia, please come in. Torres nodded. Mr. Harrison, thank you for your cooperation. We have warrants to search the premises and to arrest Gregory and Ava Harrison. Of course, Kenneth said, stepping aside. They're upstairs, bedroom at the end of the hall. He watched as 6 officers moved up the stairs with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds later, he heard Ava's voice, real panicked. What is this? You can't just, Ava Harrison. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, financial fraud, and forgery. Torres's voice was flat, professional. Gregory Harrison, you're under arrest as an accomplice to these crimes and for wire fraud. More shouting. Greg's voice, confused, scared. Ava's getting louder, more desperate. They brought them downstairs in handcuffs. Greg was pale, shaking, still in his pajamas. Ava wore a silk robe, her hair disheveled, but her eyes were sharp, calculating, looking for an angle, an escape. Those eyes landed on Kenneth. You, her voice was pure venom. You did this. You were supposed to be dead. I know, Kenneth finished calmly. Yes, I know. $25,000, wasn't it? That's what you paid Randy Sumner and Dean Walker to murder me. Her face went white. Greg turned to stare at Kenneth. Dad, I don't. What is she talking about? Don't play stupid now, Greg, Kenneth said. You were there. You stood on the porch and watched them carry out that carpet. The carpet that was supposed to have my body wrapped inside it. I didn't know, Greg stammered. She said they were just. He stopped, realizing he was confirming he'd been there. Agent Garcia stepped forward. We have video evidence, phone records, financial transactions, Randy Sumner's full confession. and forensic evidence from the carpet you kept in your garage, DNA from both hired men. This case is airtight. Ava's eyes blazed at Kenneth. You were supposed to die. That was the plan. It was perfect. How did I survive? Kenneth smiled coldly. I never left Charleston. I watched from across the street while your hired killers carried out that carpet. Recorded everything, every face, every license plate, every incriminating moment. She lunged toward Kenneth. 2 officers grabbed her immediately, pulled her back. You old fool. You should have died. This house should be mine. That money should be mine. You don't deserve any of it. But I earned it, Kenneth said quietly. That's the difference between us, Ava. I earned everything I have. You just wanted to take it. Torres cleared his throat. That's enough. Let's go. They led them toward the door. Greg was crying now, openly sobbing. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I didn't want to do it. She made me. She said we had no choice. The debts, the pressure. Kenneth looked at his son, his only child. The boy he'd raised, educated, tried to teach right from wrong. You had a choice, Greg. You've always had choices. You chose this. His face crumpled. Asterisk, they loaded them into separate vehicles, standard procedure for co-conspirators. Keep them apart. Prevent them from coordinating stories. As the cars pulled away, Colin emerged from where he'd been waiting in his own vehicle, documenting everything per Kenneth's request. Well, Colin said, that's done. That's phase 1, Kenneth corrected. Now comes the trial. Colin nodded. Randy Sumner's cooperation is gold, and the FBI's financial investigation found even more. Greg was running a money laundering scheme through accounts in 3 states. Wire fraud, interstate commerce. It's all federal now. Good, Kenneth said. Are you all right? Colin's voice was gentle. Kenneth considered the question, watched the police cars disappear around the corner. Ask me after the sentencing. September 2025, 4 months later. The trial took 3 weeks. Federal courthouse, downtown Charleston. The prosecution presented their case with devastating precision. The video Kenneth had recorded showing Randy and Dean carrying the carpet. Phone records documenting 12 calls between Ava and Randy over 3 weeks. Financial records showing the $12,500 payment. Randy Sumner's detailed testimony about the murder-for-hire arrangement. Consuelo's testimony about the overheard phone call. The carpet itself, with DNA evidence from both hired killers. Then the financial crimes. FBI forensic accountants had traced everything. The $67,000 Ava stole through forged signatures. Greg's money laundering scheme involving accounts in 3 states. Wire fraud. Interstate commerce violations. It kept adding up. Ava's defense attorney tried. Argued Randy's testimony was unreliable, that he was lying to reduce his sentence. Suggested the video could have been staged. Claimed Ava was being framed, but the evidence was overwhelming. Greg's attorney took a different approach. Full admission, plead for leniency. Greg took the stand, sobbing, explaining how he'd lost his job. Fallen into debt, felt trapped, how Ava had pressured him. Convinced him this was the only way. The jury wasn't moved. October 8th, 2025, sentencing day. Kenneth sat in the courtroom's second row, exactly where he'd sat every day of the trial. Colin beside him, Consuelo behind them. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the pre-sentencing reports. Stern woman, late 50s, 20 years on the federal bench. Ava Harrison, please rise. Ava stood. She'd lost weight during custody. Face gaunt, skin sallow, but her eyes still held that calculating hardness. The court has reviewed all evidence and testimony, Judge Morrison began. You orchestrated an elaborate murder-for-hire plot against your father-in-law. You stole $67,000 through forgery. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the severity of your crimes. The judge paused. For conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison. For attempted murder, 8 years consecutive. For wire fraud and forgery, 5 years consecutive. Total, 33 years without possibility of parole for 25 years. Ava's face barely moved. She'd expected this. Gregory Harrison, please rise. Greg stood slowly. He looked broken, shoulders slumped, eyes red. Mr. Harrison, you were complicit in the murder plot against your own father. You participated willingly. You stood by as hired killers carried what you believed was your father's body. Additionally, you ran a money laundering operation for 18 months. The judge's voice softened slightly, not with sympathy, but with pity. For accessory to attempted murder, 10 years in federal prison. For wire fraud and money laundering, 8 years consecutive. Total 18 years. Greg's knees buckled. Officers steadied him. Randy Sumner and Dean Walker, in exchange for your cooperation, your sentences are reduced. Mr. Sumner, 12 years. Mr. Walker, 10 years. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Officers moved to escort the defendants out. They'd be transported to different federal facilities within days. As they passed Kenneth's row, Greg turned toward him, face wet with tears. Dad, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted. Kenneth stood, walked to the railing, looked directly into his son's eyes. For 37 years, he'd been his father, raised him, taught him, tried to instill values. Somewhere along the way, he'd failed. Or Greg had chosen his own path. Maybe both. Kenneth spoke quietly, just loud enough for him and Ava to hear. Greed costs more than patience. 6 words. Everything they needed to understand. If they'd simply waited, been patient, they would have inherited everything naturally. Instead, their greed, their impatience cost them everything. Future, life outside prison walls. Ava's face twisted with rage, started to shout. Officers pulled them both away, toward holding cells, toward the transports that would carry them to federal facilities. Kenneth turned and walked out. Outside, Charleston's October sun was warm. Beautiful day. Consuelo was waiting. Kenneth had given her a substantial raise and formally made her head of household staff. She'd earned it. Her warning had saved his life. Mr. Harrison, she smiled. Justice is done. Justice is done, Kenneth agreed. They walked to Kenneth's car. The house was still his. The money was still his. The life he'd built was still his. But more importantly, he was still alive. At 68, he'd been given a second chance most people never get. A chance to see his would-be murderers face consequences. A chance to walk free while they went to prison for decades. Kenneth thought about Greg briefly. Wondered if he'd used those 18 years to become better or emerge more bitter. Not his problem anymore. He'd done what he could, raised him, given him opportunities, tried to teach him right from wrong. His choices after that were his own. Kenneth drove home to his house, his sanctuary, the place they'd tried to take from him. That evening, he sat in his study with a glass of wine, good wine, expensive wine, wine he'd earned on, looked out at the Charleston skyline. Somewhere in that city, in holding cells, Greg and Ava were realizing what they'd lost, what their greed had cost them. Kenneth raised his glass in a silent toast. To justice, to survival, to patience over greed, and to the next chapter of his life, whatever it might hold. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.